express gratitude?
Um, well, I think the first thing to say is that it's very difficult to understand another person until I understand myself, right? Um, and so I think seeking first to understand, who are we? What's our story? How do we get where we've got to? What are our, you encouraged at the outset, what are our habits? What are the things that are holding us back, getting in the way? So understanding ourselves and then others. I think the second is to lead with compassion and love. And again, I think there's an order to that. We need to be compassionate to ourselves, and we need to love ourselves, and then others. We cannot give what we've not got. Um, and then the third thing I think is I remind myself um, almost daily that I don't have any rights other than those that someone else has given to me. Um, I'm not owed anything. I did nothing to be born, when, where, or even to whom I was born. My life is a gift, and the only appropriate response to such a gift is one of gratitude. So I think, and we did. We started by saying thank you. Um, but actually, just acknowledging all of the things in our lives on a daily basis, not only that we should be grateful for, but acknowledging them by saying thank you, and starting and not stopping, right? Not making it an event, but a habit of being grateful for everything that we have. And I woke up this morning. I was woken by the cockerel at 3:30, right? And I'm not sure. Thank you was the first phrase that came into my head, but what it did, it reminded me that in about an hour and a half's time, the birds would start singing. And
Mm.
when the birds start singing, that's normally when I start saying my thank yous.
Mm.
And then I don't stop. And when I go to bed, I'm grateful for being able to go to bed, right? Go to a bed, for the comfort of bed and for the promise of a good night's sleep. So yeah, I think some of the advice. Hopefully it's simple, and keeping it
Wow.
simple. Keeping it simple is not easy, but it is, I think,
Mhm.
um, reasonably simple.
Okay. Just still on the leadership characters, because you deal and meet so many leaders, what would be, as you look at it, like if you could challenge every leader on this call tonight to stop one specific behavior tomorrow, what would it be and why?
Ah. Um, well, I think the first thing I would say is stop using other search firms. No, I'm joking. I- I'm joking. I think the number one thing is stop living, stop living in the past or trying to live in the future, right? Living in the past leads to depression. Living in the future creates anxiety. Um, we only have now. There is no other place that we can actually live, notwithstanding our best efforts. Um, do what is right now, because none of us, we like to think that we can control what happens next, and we can't, right? There are so many variables, so many moving parts, other actors, etc. Do what is right now, which is the only thing that you can do anything about. And in my experience, it will lead to the next best version of next. Um, that's all we can do, right? I have no control over how people respond. I have no control over how they hear or what they hear. Um, all I can do is seek to do the best and do it in the right way. Um,
Wow.
Sorry, can I had a couple of others actually because I think they're important because there's never one thing, right? I think
Mm,
having boundaries, the um, one of the most unhealthy things in any relationship is not having boundaries. But within this group of leaders, I've observed for lots of good reasons, but none of them good enough. We don't have strong enough boundaries in terms of yeah, in terms of our relationships, and in particular our relationships with those that we're working with and serving.
mm,
I would also say it's so important to invest in you, right? The greatest gift that you can give to those in your world is to know, value, and love yourself, right? My father said to me that the greatest gift that you can give your children is to love their mum, and the greatest gift that I can give to my wife actually is to love myself, because as I said earlier, I can't give what I haven't got.
wow. Very wise words. Very, very wise words. Thank you for that, David. And you've just mentioned, because we also had a question about how does keeping the 95-year-old self in mind change the way you approach your work and leadership today? And I think it's related to the question you told us. We have to stop living in the past or living in the future. I really, really love that. Thank you for that. I don't know whether you had anything else to say. We just have about a few more minutes to go before we open it up for the team. Yeah.
Sure. So I think that's it's a great question and a way to think about things. And of course, many people over the years have written about, what is it you want people to say at your funeral or, at your on your deathbed. You're not going to be saying, I wish I'd earned more money or been more successful. So there are lots of different ways of framing it. I think for me, because you ask about my 95-year-old self. I'm hoping my 95-year-old self will have exactly the same view that my 56-year-old self has. And that is, I know what the end is, right? I know what the finish line looks like. The only
Mm,
question is when I get to that finish line, what's going to be said to me, right? And we talked about this in our prep meeting earlier. Clayton Christensen, who was a Harvard professor, he wrote a book, How Will You Measure Your Life? And in it, he encourages us to many very positive shifts in our thinking in terms of how we measure our life. But ultimately, the 95-year-old self, or the one that crosses that finish line, the question's actually slightly different. It's how will my life be measured? And my life is going to be measured by one thing. Was I faithful? Right? It's well done, good and faithful servant. It's not anything else. Right? And actually, before the well done, good and faithful servant, it's quite helpful to also be able to respond positively to the, who are you, right? And why are you here? And there are many who I suspect won't be able to answer that question well, and I'm assured of the answer of that, which is also helpful. So living in light of that end, right, and wanting to hear those words is probably what my 95-year-old self, or the one crossing the finish line, would say. And I think I know we've run out of time, so apologies. I'm going to take just 2 minutes. There are three questions that I think it's really important that every single one of us answers well, right? They are universal questions that every human being on the face of the earth asks in one way or another, right? They are the question of identity, who am I? The question of purpose, why am I here? And the question of direction, based on who I am and why I'm here, what should I be doing? What should I be giving myself to? And Simon Sinek, who popularized the phrase "start with why," which is a great question, but it's the wrong place to start. Because if we find our purpose before we've answered the question of identity, then in our purpose and in our work, we will find an identity which is fine in many ways whilst everything's going well, but that's not life. Right? Things don't always go well. And so it's really important that we find and answer that question, who am I? And for those who have a faith, a Christian faith, there is, before all of those, the most important question to ask and answer, and that's whose am I? Because when I know whose I am, then I can fully answer who I am. And up until that point, it will be at best, it will be a partial answer, right? Not necessarily a bad answer, but it will be incomplete. So only as I understand fully whose I am, can I understand fully who I am. And I think that's probably the greatest privilege of my life has been that journey to discovering not just who is he, but because of who he is, who am I?
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, David. It's been quite an engaging session. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Dorcas because we just have a few tidbits to jump to the next session. Thank you. Dorcas, Karibu.
Thank you very much. As we make use of the chat box, one of the things I like are the comments that are coming in. I'll go with the last one, and that is from Ruth. The power is now. May says, live in the present. Also, again, Ruth, simple indeed. It is not easy to do, but it is easy if we do follow the steps for sure. I can add on that. This one says it's quite clear on my end, which I guess it was a network issue, but also just going back to Irene's comment, when asking for feedback, we have to accept that we may have to lean into discomfort. And I know we're going to get into the questions, and I'd want us to take this one moment to just make use of the chat box. One of the things, and I'll just spring it as a thought to David, because I know he brought it up during the dry run, is a story about his journey, and I know Kemi knows it very well, and I'll nudge Kemi a little bit, even if it's 5 minutes, the very short version of it. But I would really would like us to just step into that space briefly, into the making of his company, linking back to just exactly what the book is about, what got you here, won't get you there. So I'm bouncing it back to Kemi because I feel it's so timely. As I said, the dry run I felt was the first half of this version, and I feel everybody needs to be included in that conversation. Over to you, Kemi.
Wow. Thank you for that. And I also agree with you, it is important. And I feel the platform actually belongs to David. Yeah. And I know we don't have much time, but I know it will be lovely for you to just tell us, what got you here and probably briefly where you're going, or you know how to wrap it all around why we are all here. Yeah, because yes, we turned in and we're excited to hear from you. So do it probably 4 minutes. Terrible.
Okay, thank you. So I guess the question is really around triage in the last 10 years. Is that right, Kemi? Yeah. Okay,
Yes,
great.
yes, David.
So in 2015, I moved to Brazil, where I currently am actually, with attending the wedding of our son. I moved here after 17 years of leading corporate turnarounds, and I hadn't realized that I was burnt out, but I was. But I came here because I believed it was the right thing to do. I didn't come to anything. I didn't have a job lined up. In fact, I left all of my work, my non-exec roles, everything behind. And I also left my family behind. Um, and at the time, I didn't understand entirely why all of that was necessary, except that I thought it was the right thing to do. And there's a much longer story behind that for anyone who's interested for another time. Well, as I arrived in Brazil, I asked myself a couple of questions that I asked lots of other people. What is it you're really passionate about? You know, what would you die for? What problem do you want to solve? And what's a real world need that presents itself at the intersect of your passion and the problem solving? And and that led me to the thing I'm most passionate about is the poor. So I asked three questions: who are the poor, where are the poor, why are the poor poor? That led me to the food system, and ended up writing a paper on a redesign of the food system from the ground up. But on that journey, along the way, I was asking lots of people, what's the biggest issue? You know, standard consulting type question. What's the biggest issue that you're facing? What's the biggest challenge you're facing? And then at the very end, when I'd finished the paper, I asked a group of close friends who were investors, what's your biggest challenge? And they said, not unsurprisingly, portfolio performance, because frankly, that's the biggest issue for all investors. And then I said, well, what's going on? And they said, leadership. And I said, what's going on with leadership? And they said, well, there are three main things that are happening. The first thing is that leaders can't do what they say they can do, right? The second is that they're not teachable. They can't learn the things that they don't know. Most most obviously because they don't acknowledge that they don't know those things. And then the third was that they have a character trait that under pressure doesn't just derail them, but it can often derail the organization too. And they said to me, you know, you've been talking for years about this thing called the investable leader. Why don't you help people like us identify investable leaders? Why don't you codify what that looks like? You know, what does an investable leader look like? And why don't you build a process to identify those people for not just for investors, but for organizations, either when they're investing or when they're hiring. And on that journey of codifying it, there were 5 dimensions that we identified. Right. The first is the obvious, I guess, that there's a role that we're hiring for: CEO, CFO, product manager, whatever. So, you know, we focus on executive, strategic, and difficult to fill roles, but it could be any role. Then there's the context, right? And context is highly nuanced. It's not just the culture of the organization. It's not just the geographic context. It's so much more: the political environment, the strategy of the organization, the change agenda, and then once you've defined those two, it's what competencies, what capabilities, and critically, what capacities do we need this person to have to be effective in this role, in this context? And I, you know, always use obvious answers because they're the best ones, or obvious examples. Being a CEO of a logistics and distribution business in the UK is not the same as being a CEO of a logistics and distribution business in Kenya, right? It is not. And one of the things that's so often missed in our environment, and I'm going to use our in broad terms as emerging markets, very challenging environments where we can't be assured of things like power, or access to cash, to foreign currency, there are just many, 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 is there's this issue of capacity, right? The river has to run deep if we are going to lead well in our environment. So how does the leader, the individual, how do they renew themselves every day, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, so that they can go and go again? The fourth is connection. So often things like charisma and chemistry are conflated with great leadership. And whilst both of these things are very much nice to have, in our environment, in a relational context, connection is the most important, not just internally, but externally. This ability to build relationships based on trust is absolutely essential. And then finally, character. Character is the cornerstone and foundation of not just leadership, but of every relationship. And so understanding what is character, so that we have a common understanding, and then how do we measure, evaluate, and assess a person's character? And many people ask, how do you do that? So, it must be really difficult. And actually, the answer is no, it's not. It's not that difficult, because our character is the sum of our lived beliefs and values. And so it shows up in our behaviors, right? Because we always do the things that matter to us, right? And as I said, it shows up in our behaviors, and of course our behaviors, the things that we consistently do, they're our habits, and then our habits ultimately become our character. There are two others that we've recently added but haven't formalized. The sixth is commitment. So why are you here, right? Because if the commitment doesn't come from a deep place, right, then at some point you're going to put it in the too hard basket, because it's really hard, right? Doing what we do, leading in our context, in our organizations, is really difficult. So that commitment has to come from a very deep place. And then the seventh one is community, right? Someone said, can't remember who, that where we end up is the sum of the closest 5 to 10 people in our lives. So being part of a good community, because, bad company corrupts good character, right? So who are those that you're closest to? And I think professionally and personally, having somebody who is close enough to you to see what's really going on and to say, because it's not enough to see, right? It's really important to have someone who's willing to say, David, that's not helpful. That behavior, that attitude, that thing that was you need to be careful, right? And this will resonate with some, if not all, but it's a really great question. Who is the Nathan in your life, right? Who is the person who's going to call you on the bad stuff or the unhelpful stuff? Yeah, and so that's what we do. I think that what got us here won't get us there, is unbelievably apt. It always has been, but it's particularly apt for now. We know that most of the time the person we're hiring actually, and this is from data, that's not me, we know that most of the time the person we're hiring actually doesn't have the talent to do the role that we're hiring them for, right? It's 82%. 82% of the time, the data says we are hiring the wrong person. Not a bad person, just not the right person, right? And so that's critical. We also know that our profile of leader, the person, and this is why profile is so important, the profile of the person that we think, and when I say we think, it's typically, when I say we, I'm talking about other C leaders, they say this is what we need, right? And actually, the data says that most of the talent, most of the people who have the talent to lead well aren't currently in leadership roles. So not only is our profile wrong, but our process is wrong too. Because what do we do when we want a CEO or a CFO or any other person? We immediately say, oh, they have to have done this before, which means they're currently in a leadership role. So we're merely perpetuating the same issues. And so a focus on character, whilst a great place to start isn't enough. But I tell you, from my own experience, and I have, anybody who knows me knows that my background, I'm not educated. I didn't go to college, didn't go to university. I'm not particularly bright or brilliant. And that's not being English self-deprecating. That's data too. I'll show you the tests. What I've experienced is that my character, and not necessarily always having high character, but my commitment to being a man of character, has carried me more than I care to imagine. My character has carried me. It's not just made whatever competence I have had accessible to others, but it has carried me in the most profound ways. When I didn't have the experience, the knowledge, the skills, it carried me when I started my own company, when I had never managed a person or a business. It carried me when I came into 2008 and the global crisis, and I'd never been in that situation before, like everyone else. And it's carried me ever since. It carried me when I came to Africa. And again, what got me here won't get me there. And I realized that my leadership style didn't work, right? That which had served me so well up until the point when I moved to Africa no longer served me. And so I had to change if I wanted to lead well. So yeah, lots and lots of reflections, Kemi. Sorry for running over.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing and being vulnerable with us. I feel now we can just jump into the next session and we'll address what we haven't addressed. Karibu, Dorcas.
Thank you. So I'd like to jump into the questions. There are some people who have sent questions directly, and I'd like to start with the first one that had been shared. And I'll do first the chat, then we'll go to the other ones, and I'll also invite Marsha to ask a few of them. So one question is, how do you become a great leader, and how do you do this when you are seeking to get feedback from your juniors, especially when it's feedback forward, and how can it help me become a great leader? So I believe this is somebody who is either already at a senior role and is trying to build up, putting consideration the different habits that you have learned from the book. Yeah.
This is a question to me.
Yes, yes. That one I was told, please, before we move, I was told throw it. How do we get feedback, forward feedback as a leader? And how can it make the person a better leader?
Well, I think if you, well, first of all, I don't know too many great leaders, right? I think what I've been amazed about from my own journey is how this deeply flawed person can actually achieve anything. And I think that's one of the miracles of life is that it isn't, and I alluded to this earlier, it isn't that I am great or that I have high character, but I'm committed. I am deeply committed to being a person of character. And that commitment is often enough, right? This focus on being great. I don't think I'll ever be great, but I want to be great. And so I think one of the future forward, not great from any other point. I want to do great things and have a great impact. And that future forward thinking is, okay, I remember two questions I asked a young guy I was mentoring years ago, actually during the 2008 crisis. I said, two questions that really have helped me is how do I want to live, right? And who do I want to become, right? So it's future focused, right? Like, and so the only way I can, or at least springs to mind, is one day I decided I wanted to run a marathon, right? Crazy idea, but looking back, but I wanted to run a marathon, right? And so I started to, act like a marathon runner. So I would train, what's the training program? I would buy the clothes and the trainers. I would talk, I would eat, I would, all those things that are synonymous with being a marathon runner. And then one day, as a result of doing all of those things, I became a marathon runner, right? And it's the same, when I remember my eldest son, actually the year before the global crisis, at December 2007, he said to me at Christmas when I asked him, what one thing would you like to be different next year? And he said, more time. And I reflected on that, and actually it was the catalyst to me resigning from the role I was in, because the only way that I could give my son more time and my family more time was to not have to be a public company CEO. And so that conversation catalyzed well, how do I want to live, right? Well, one of them is I want to have time for my family. So that then shaped decisions I made around, okay, what roles would give me the time and what roles wouldn't give me the time. And then so I think, there are a load of things that we can do to help us shape and become, to have the life that we want to have, to become the person we want to become, and to live the way that we want to live, and then to live by those on a daily basis. And, Soren Kierkegaard said that life can only be lived forwards and understood backwards, right? And so that living forwards, okay, doing the right thing, living one day at a time, and then you look back, and this year is 10 years from that triage journey. I didn't know what I was doing at the time, and many would say I still don't know what I'm doing. But as I look back on those 10 years, what I see is this incredible life that has been built that way. And I think that would be my encouragement to every leader, is to do the same thing.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I think one of the hardest hurdle as HR profession is one, of course, getting feedback and giving feedback, especially either when you're moving from one point to another in terms of different industry and you're getting into a new one and you're going through hurdles. I'd like to open the floor for any comments or any questions from everyone that is listening into this. Whether you've read the book or not, you've been taken through a session where you can interrelate with what you do. So I know we have quite a number of leaders in the call, but also happy to hear if you have any feedback that you'd want to give David. I think one of the feedbacks I would give you, David, you're authentic, and how you have shared your story has challenged me, especially the one where you mention it's not only once or twice, but you have kept inquiring on feedback from people on what's this irritating habit. It has really made me, put a question in my head. What is that irritating habit I have? And would I be comfortable also to share it with people in such a setting? Because then it means, one, you have overcome it, but also two, that vulnerability, I feel that is very good, because sometimes it's very rare. We hear of a lot of praise, we hear of good books and everything happening, but people don't talk about the murky journey that they have been in. I'll look at the comments before handing over to Masha for the next steps. I know Ruth has been sharing quite a number of the nuggets as they have been streaming in. I really appreciate that. Anyone on the space would want to say anything before I hand over? We have Sylvia, Carol, we have Kate, Maria. Feel free. I think for me, I have so much. I do not want it to have a one monotone, but feel free to comment. Masha, any comments as I hand over to you? Oh yes, I can see Bukachi has put the camera. That is the sign that you'd like to talk. Over to you.
No, thank you so much. Listening very keenly, and David, great to connect with you again. I'm very excited that you honored us to just have this conversation with us. One of the things that I've been reflecting, even as you've been speaking, is where one can be vulnerable as a leader to ask for feedback. But then, we always say that retaliation, we always believe it happens bottom down. Then the retaliation does not happen upwards, because upward bullying has become a phenomena that has become very common in today's conversations. And you find a lot of leaders are not able to be authentic because of that fear of upward bullying. So it's just gotten me thinking and asking myself, then how do we actually protect the vulnerability of leaders so that they can have the courage to really own up and take the feedback without necessarily having to be defensive and to kind of protect their space? So this is just a thought that's going on in my mind, and I might not have an answer for it, and I don't know whether you want to comment on it, or maybe it's a conversation we can explore another time. Thank you.
I think, there's a luxury, and I enjoy many. I saw that the person who made this comment is actually on the call, so I hope they don't mind me mentioning this. But I recognize, and I knew this before I moved to Africa and was working there, is that I enjoy some incredible privileges. Amazing privileges. The phrase that was used is white privilege on steroids, right? Which I didn't really know how to take until I got to know the person a lot better, and they're a very dear friend. Having your own company is a privilege, right? But it doesn't protect you from the things that you're talking about, Bukachi. And it's really difficult to be vulnerable because there are, in every sense, you can find yourself unwittingly in a position where you're not just vulnerable but exposed, and not just you but the organization. I remember years ago that I had to make a choice. My HR director said, I understand why you're trying to do what you're trying to do, but legally it's not possible. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, because the laws in this country, and this was the UK, the laws in this country basically mean you can't have that conversation. And I said, but it's the right conversation. And she said, I know. But, the law and our environment, our culture can often drive a coach and horses between that which we believe is right from a principle point of view and right from a relational point of view. And back then I made a choice, which was, regardless of the law and the exposure that opened me up to, that I would do, or at least try to do, the right thing. And I think when you create an environment, and I'm trying to create an environment where others are safe, right? Safe to be themselves, safe to say what they think and what they feel. And again, I stress the word try, because I think the best we can do is to try well, right? Because it's really hard. That what you do within that context is that you create an environment where people actually it's safe to be wrong, right? And I'm wrong a lot, right? I say things that are probably wrong full stop, but certainly culturally would be, at best, could be misconstrued. And part of my journey with our team has been the joy actually of both me and others being able to be wrong, right, and to get it wrong. But that takes a tremendous amount of work by everybody, because actually it would only take one person to derail the whole thing, right? To make a complaint, to formalize it, to bring, whatever it is. And so it's really hard, Bikashi, but what's the alternative, right? I think that's where I got to back when I was first challenged. What's the alternative? The alternative is that, if we start out just 1 degree apart in terms of what we're trying to achieve, right? If there's just 1 degree of dissonance between the person who I am and want to become and how we manage our organizations and how we lead, then at some point down the road, we will be miles apart from myself, right? Let alone anyone else, right? The organization that I'm leading is not the one that I want to lead, because I'm having to manage it in a particular way to protect myself, to not be vulnerable, I think the final thing, and this is just a personal reflection, is I am prone to oversharing and being overly vulnerable. So I think there's a tremendous amount of wisdom that's required, to know what to share, when, who to be vulnerable with, etc. And again, I'm trying to learn the difference.
Thank you very much, David, for commenting on that. Anyone who would have any comment, even as I hand over to Marsha? For a moment, I was very still because, as I said, the dry run went so well. So I was hoping David will just continue on it. But I must say, the feedback on that was very profound, because then it makes us, even as we aspire to be leaders in different spaces, know how to approach the different relationships that we are creating, and also the kind of feedback that we go collecting, so that the people who are around us also trust us with their conversations, even as leaders. I can see Irene's hand, and then after that, I'll hand it over to Ruth to take us back so that we're able to land down. Over to you, Irene.
Oh, I wanted to speak on the issue that was brought up on retaliation, because it's something that happens quite often. And it's something that I've seen happen a lot, where people are afraid to speak up, to even give feedback. And one thing that I find that leads us to move from retaliation is asking people are they speaking up? So talking to your people, whatever your listening strategy is, but use that to find out if people are actually speaking up. Because if you're able to get to, it becomes an aha moment when leaders are able to say that the people they are leading are not actually speaking up. And in my current role, I've been involved in a restoration work project where we're trying to move people from speaking up to how do we restore those relationships. So, and as with giving feedback is one of those tricky things, because then you're asking people to have those uncomfortable conversations. So how are we creating that space for people to have these uncomfortable conversations? Yeah, so that's just what I wanted to speak on retaliation.
Thank you very much, Irene. Over to you, Ruth, to take this plane and land it. I know we're almost on top of the hour. Yes.
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you, David. Thank you, Kemi. Before I let you go, I would like to ask for one commitment from you. I'm sure you've seen my comments where I have shared the 20+1 habits that we need to stop so that we can unlock the next level. All right?
if we need to get there, I want us to each on the chat just write one thing, one habit that you will work on dropping in the coming month. This is the beginning of the month, and we have a whole 30 days ahead of us. So I would like each of us to commit, which we are calling the stop doing commitment. Should I go first? All right. I commit to stop the excessive need to be me. Please type. I will not say the name, I'll just say the comment. So we are committing to stop the excessive need to be me, committing to stop to speaking while angry. Someone else is also committing to stop speaking while angry. Someone else is committing to setting boundaries and stop being a people pleaser, especially around customers. Setting boundaries, very important. Someone else is committing to stop speaking when angry. Someone else is committing to stop speaking when angry. Oh, that is popular. To commit to joining more of this session. Yay, welcome. Someone is committing to stop starting with no, but, or however. Someone else is committing to the same, to stop starting with no, but, or however. Someone else is committing to stop speaking while angry and to stop making excuses. Well, that's a big one. Someone else is committing to stop failing to express gratitude. One lesson we are taking home today. I think that one has landed very well, Dorcas, of gratitude and expressing it. Someone else has committed to stop withholding information. Gen Z, yeah! Gen Z are accusers of being gatekeepers, right? The other generations, I will not mention which. So committing to stop withholding information, that's a big one. Someone else is committing to finish the books they've not finished reading, and I'm right there with them. And yes, thank you so much for your commitment. We will hold you accountable to this stop doing commitment. Thank you very much. Welcome, Masha.
All right. I'm sorry I dropped off. I cannot even see. I've joined from my phone, so hopefully you can all see me. My task today was to give a vote of thanks. And I will just start off by saying thank you to every one of you because you have joined us and you have, walked with us this journey through all the 3 books that we have read, including this one. So thank you very much. We want to thank David for giving us his time at such a short notice and for taking time to even go through and read the book in such a short notice. So thank you, David, very much. Thank you, Kemunto, because you're just superwoman. I keep telling you. So thank you for that. Thank you for the forum, New School HR, whichever forum you may be in. Let's keep encouraging each other, keep supporting each other, keep doing what we do, keep practicing good, clean HR, be people of character. And I think the one that I'll take from today is be an investable leader. So thank you for teaching us so much, David. So I will end my vote of thanks there. The other thing that I was supposed to announce is the next book. And I think this being the last book that we shall read in 2025, we will take another approach to which book is going to be next. So we will involve you in picking it out. And this is the book that will take us to the end of the year. We're in Q4. Yeah, so that announcement will come in the group. Keep the faith, keep being bookworms, and we shall see you and have a very good night.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.